present. So I guess we're not ready to do any business. And our first presenter, Mark Wilcox, is not yet here.
He had some technical difficulties and he is joining us soon.
Okay. There's a possibility that I will have network issues. Last night it was very sluggish here at my home. So if you lose contact, Eric, would you take over?
Certainly.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, Emily, you said you called.
Yeah, she said she can't call in.
And who was that? Was that Kathy?
Karen Myers.
Karen. Should I try Kathy then?
Yes.
I see Mark is now with us. We are at the point where we're prepared to listen to you, Mark. You're prepared to talk to us.
Okay, well, I'm actually going to let Jamie kick me off here. And then I will.
Yep. Yeah. Can you share your screen, Mark, with the slides?
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you. Well, welcome everybody. Jamie Damon, again, I'm with Kearns and West. You've seen me on and off for a couple of years now, talking about the PMLS project as we've moved it forward. And today we're going to be focused on a real estate update. Mark's put together a presentation for all of you about that. And so he's going to be carrying the bulk of the discussion here. And at some point, we'll be moving into an executive session to discuss things in more detail. But if you want to go to the next slide, Mark, we want to just orient you to where we are in our PMLS conversations. So this 18-month timeline looks familiar to you. It's one we've had in front of you since 2021. And so I've grayed out all of the first 4 columns because those pieces are done. So here we are in summer of 2022. And just like how we've brought to you different presentations in a couple of smaller bites, we're doing that as well with real estate. And so we're ready to talk with you some about an overview of the real estate plan, timeline, what the elements are, kind of where we are in that timeline around real estate, what analysis needs to happen, what your role is, and then some draft gap analysis. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide. So that jumps us right into Mark's presentation. So Mark, do you want to jump in, or should we pause and see if there's any questions about where we are on the timeline before you kick it off?
Sure. Happily, yeah, that'd be great. If there's anything in particular that folks want to get out of this, we can make sure to address those items throughout the presentation.
Yeah, so why don't you go back to the timeline and we'll take a look at what this topic is under real estate 1, and you'll see we'll come back in the later in the fall and the winter with a couple other bites at the real estate conversation. Do people have any questions about where we are in the timeline before we launch into Mark's presentation? Not seeing any. All right, Mark, it looks like we're good to go. And then just in terms of questions, Mark's got a number of slides. And if folks can hold their questions until Mark gets through a certain amount of slides, and then he'll pause and let you know when we can open up for questions. So that way, because sometimes subsequent slides will answer the questions that you have. So Mark, what do you say? Ready to go?
Ready to go.
Okay.
Okay, thanks all. I think thanks for the sort of the preface there and the context, Jamie. I think I do have a number of slides, and my intention is not to go through all of them ad nauseum, but we also recognize that it's been a while since you've seen this material. And so if you do have questions, this is an opportunity to get refamiliar with this, but we're going to try to focus on what's next and what our big milestones are, and when we actually need to perform various tasks, but we're not going to dive too deep. So anyway, without further ado, this is the overview. You've seen some of these slides are from the Corps' real estate presentation. So, you know, we are here at between the blue and the green phase. We are not quite, we are done with the feasibility phase, and we are about to step into PED. Hopefully this spring we'll be moving into PED, in which case we'll be working to define the project better so that we can refine the actual boundaries of the real estate we need. And in the meantime, staff is working to sort of perfect our understanding of where our real estate is. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So the acquisition phase comes towards the end of PED, just before construction. Obviously that makes sense. We don't know exactly what real estate we need until we've defined the boundaries of the projects precisely, and that there's no changes throughout the design process. These are sort of our funding milestones, and this gives you a real sense of when the dollars are needed, when they hit, and I'll talk a little bit about who we expect to fund various activities so that there's no gasps. And I think most of you have a good sense of this, but so provided we start PED on time around spring, and the reason it's spring, I mean, is because the federal government has been notoriously slow to get their budgets out, to approve their budgets and appropriations, with sort of a divided Congress, and so it'll take a little while for the funds to trickle down from the Corps. In following subsequent years, we expect to operate under continuing resolutions, so there won't be a big delay each fiscal year. But this number here has been widely socialized. We put the approximate signs on all of these because, as we know, that as time passes, there is some escalation of costs due to inflation, and there are things that increase or reduce the cost. So when we actually come up with put together the PED agreement, it could actually reduce costs in some things, and then again, escalation could increase others. But the PED estimates that we've been working with, you've seen this number. You should be pretty familiar with that number. And as we've discussed in recent board meetings, most of those costs will be absorbed through the Business Oregon State Levy Grant funds, and the districts themselves are paying for our local cost share. So that was a great way to offset costs. In summer of 2025, that's when the real estate acquisition phase begins, because the Corps has projected that the design will take about 2 years till we have sort of a fuzzy design for all phases, but we have a constructible plans and specs package for the first phase. And the Corps expected that to be in Pen 1 with the railroad embankment and the other Pen 1 projects. But there's nothing to say that this is all based on what the Corps project team proposed. But there may be some interjection, there may be different disbursement of funds that may drive starting in a different area, maybe starting with a smaller chunk. And so that all affects real estate as well, because we expect to only be asked for real estate acquisition by phase, which is nice because then we don't have to bite off as big of a chunk right off the bat, and allows us more time to acquire properties. But phase 1, we expect will begin around summer of 2025, when we expect the first phase of PED to be wrapping up, and we have the real estates sort of more precisely delineated. The $13 million figure, that is actually a total figure for the entire real estate package, including contingency. So I'll have more finite information when we finish the gap analysis to sort of break it down by the currently delineated phases. But so that's $13 million for easements and any fee title. This is predominantly an easement real estate acquisition package, and so that's our lands costs. Then fall of 2025, we'll start to acquire properties once we know the the footprint of the project is precise. And we'll be discussing the project partnering, or also known as construction agreement. And we'll have a small outlay for cash contributions. The reason you see there's two numbers there, 5% minimum cash payment, but then you see a $1.1 million. What's happened is the PED costs are credited towards our minimum 5% cash contribution. So it reduces 5% of like 130 million. 100 is obviously not $1 million, but we have other cash contributions that offset that. So we expect to make a small payment for our minimum cash contribution, and then the next big numbers hit when we begin reconstruction in places like Penn 2, where we're doing a very substantial relocations and reconstruction project along Bridgeton Road and Marine Drive. I'm going to pause for a quick second and just make sure that there's no clarification or questions needed. And if you think of others after I move on, just feel free to put it in the chat.
Mark, what percentage of the $13 million for real estate and relocation activities, or let's break out summer 2025 and spring 2026, are associated with Penn 2?
I'm sorry, you're asking like what portion would be affiliated with Penn 2?
Yeah, so this is the Penn 2 board, and what I'm interested in is finding out how much of that is within our jurisdiction.
Yeah, I'll have a little bit more information in a following slide. It'll give you a sense, and I can get you the numbers here shortly.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I think you'll see on one of the following slides is about 20% of the real estate is in Penn 1 by land area. And I literally hot off the presses this morning got some refined numbers for real estate in the various districts, broken out by district. So I'll be able to take a sidebar and get that number out soon, but I don't have it at my fingertips right now. This 24.9 million figure again is the relocations, which relocations is sort of it's a core term. Relocations includes the reconstruction activities. For instance, when we rebuild Bridgeton Road right of way, reset utilities, when we in Penn 1 where we rebuild some of the golf course assets, those sorts of activities. And that 24.9 million is the bulk of that is in Penn 2, and I can produce some figures later for you, but I estimate that it is about $15 to $20 million occurs in Penn 2. So a very substantial portion of the relocations in that district. Okay. Any other questions about this before I move on? Okay, I see Val shaking his head. Thanks. So just to be clear, the real estate is actually like most of it is the non-federal sponsor, our responsibility. So these are the Corps' responsibilities, sort of outlining which properties will be affected, where we need real estate rights. When they do the design phase, they'll produce a footprint and delineate those easements. But aside from that, once they've sort of determined what's needed, that's where we take over, and the bulk of the responsibility is ours. It's doing title searches, getting title insurance, handing that real estate package over to the Corps, and then acquiring those easements and then handing them over to the Corps, and then they double check our work, and then they can move forward with the construction activity. So Corps done a lot of these activities. They will refine the project footprint during PED, but then a lot of the heavy lifting is ours. And as you know, Amber Ayers and I have been working a lot on real estate to see, to refine our understanding of all of our easements and looking for additional easements. And We'll have more on that in the future, but I am happy to say that we've sort of been, our expectations have been met in terms of understanding how shaky some of our easements are, but we've also found some easements that we didn't know we had previously. Not to worry. There's actually a lot of there's going to be a need to obtain new easements in almost every single situation, and that's just due to the age of the easements and some of the language we need in order to be able to build a modern core project, and as well as possibly to obtain funds under a geo bond. And so things have to be a little bit tighter than some of our very old and very useful easements, but they sometimes will need to be renegotiated and new ones obtained to cover all the bases. So that's basically what's on this long list of activities. The first cluster is things that we will be doing at the end of PED. The middle cluster speaks to the construction phase. The relocation assistance services, that is really generally we anticipate only applicable to one parcel at this point in time. That may change, but at this point, that's and that's not in Pen 2. But we can talk about that in an executive session. Following each construction phase, then we submit all of our receipts in order to get credit towards our 35% cost share. So this project is, I remind you from the past, is very unique because our 35% cost share is very largely driven by LERD's costs. So we, other non-federal sponsors might have to come up with like cold cash to give directly to the Corps. Aside from PED and our $1.1 million I mentioned earlier, we are actually just spending the money and then getting cost share credit. We're buying real estate. We're going to reconstruct Bridgeton Road, Marine Drive, golf course, other features, but we're not actually giving the Corps directly a lot of cash. So we will be submitting for LERD's credit. Whenever you hear that, LERD's in large part is real estate relocations. It also deals with any hazardous waste, environmental contaminant cleanup issues that have to be resolved. So the Corps sort of pays for it via their cost share, but we pay for it directly, and then we get cost share credit for our 35%. Okay, I'm going to move a little bit more quickly. This is sort of a general distribution by land area of tax lots and easements. And again, I'll be happy to provide more information about the actual costs. Oddly enough, the Corps, because they're sort of like in sleep mode right now until they get more funding. So they were not able to provide us some basic lists of things that should be readily available based on, that was like backup for the content they developed for the plan. And so we did some computations, and we'll be able to provide a sort of a dollar value by district later. But this gives you a general sense of the facility relocations, utility relocations. It's no surprise that the bulk of them are in Pen 2, and the project footprint is very large in Pen 2 because of the Bridgeton Marine Drive roadways, and then depending on how you slice the pie, the MCDD Pen 2 cross levy work. This is an overview. Evan pointed out I wasn't able to get my ArcGIS cooperator to redo this. I clipped off the Broughton Beach work in MCDD, so I clipped off a couple parcels and minor work in MCDD. But this is these two slides are an overview of where all the real estate work is. Some of the very big squares there are proposed staging areas or construction laydown areas. Those are subject to change, but those were placeholders the Corps put in. For instance, the PIR one was not probably going to be in that spot, but to give us a sense of, yes, there's not just the levee work, but there's also some accessory temporary easement areas required for construction staging. And then here is, again, I skipped over, there's some small parcels in MCD that got clipped. This is the work in SDIC, primarily in the northwest corner and down in the southeast corner by the outlet malls. I have another slide I'll show you that zooms in on Pen 2. That was just a quick overview. So I just wanted to speak to this. I'm not going to read all these numbers. They are up there. They're in your memo as well. So if you see anything that you want to know more about in here, this is just intended to let you know what we've been doing with the funding that you've provided us to help perfect our real estate portfolio. We have gone through all the existing deed and easement documents that the district had records for, and farm them out to outside counsel to really understand better like what they provide us and what they don't provide, where they fall short, particularly for construction versus regular O&M. We've obtained title reports for almost everything in the Corps' real estate plan, except for areas where we have parcels clustered and we wanted to be efficient with our funds, where we have, say, townhomes, and we know that they're all sort of, we sort of sampled in high density areas. But we've obtained a lot of title reports and we are almost complete. We're waiting for Miller and Ash to do a follow-up analysis on those title reports so that we can complete the gap analysis, and we have a geo database that's ready to go to do some spatial wizardry and help us really paint a picture for you of how sufficient our real estate portfolio is. So, and it's important to keep in mind, like I said earlier, some of the easements, just because an easement doesn't meet 100% of our needs to go forward with construction, does not mean it's not useful. It is an easement that falls short, but it's more perfect. Really, it's going to smooth our negotiation, and it may also allow us to negotiate, have a stronger negotiating position, possibly lower the cost, lower our offering price for a particular easement if we've had a long-standing use of that easement, and we're just refining the easement. It may cost less. And then there's areas where we find out that we have not had a lot of, we don't have a lot of documentation for our easement. It's particularly very broad, very old, and it maybe doesn't quite get us where we need to be. And so we will be prepared to scale our real estate acquisition effort and understand how many properties are going to be relatively easy to obtain easements for, and how many properties might be a bigger lift, and we can prioritize accordingly. So, and then the final sort of like the important takeaway is that the Corps sort of saw our easement picture, and they saw that we didn't, that we needed to do some work on our real estate portfolio. And so they generally made an assumption that we would have to acquire new easements for everything. And so that $13 million figure is very conservative, and hopefully our cost will be reduced, but we will still get credit for what they have appraised all those properties at. So we're kind of in a good position from that standpoint. We will receive adequate credit for anything that we need to purchase. There's plenty of capacity for that. So hopefully that is clear. If you have any questions, I'm happy to. Eric.
Am I reading this correctly? So let's say that the plan has $13 million in it that would be applied to our 35%. As we get into the details, we discover that, hey, we're not going to have to spend all $13 million. Will the Corps still give us credit for the amount that they had budgeted, or will they go with actual?
Yeah, they will. And just to be clear, the 13 million includes the 35% contingency. So they will actually give us up to, they'll give us 100% credit for the actual value of the parcel. And the 35% is included because they also, they allow for overages. So if we, up to 110%. So if we get in a negotiation and have to purchase a property for 110% of the value that they appraised, previously, we will get credit for that.
Okay, so.
And then the
so let
important
me-
thing
let
is
me just-
also if we already have an existing easement or we have substantial easement to move forward, or we only have to pay 25% for that easement, we'll still get 100% credit. So the real number is probably around whatever 13 million is minus the 35%. We'll get at least about 11-ish, 10 to 11 million. Actually, it's probably my math's off. It's probably about 9.5 to 10 million at a minimum, regardless of how good or bad our easements are.
Right, but in no instance would we get more than the cash that we pay out.
Now, if, for instance, an easement is expected to cost $100,000, and we, for various reasons, are able to negotiate it to receive that easement for $25,000, we will get $100,000 credit.
Excellent. Okay, so I think I understand that. And the $13 million includes 35% contingency. But in the instance that is budgeted to be $100,000 and it turns out to be, which would include the contingency, but it turns out that it really is 150,000, anything above 110,000 would become our cost that would not be available, that could not be applied to the local share, correct?
That's correct.
All right. So just one of the things that I'll be paying attention to as we go forward is where we cross, if there are specific properties that could become problematic and cost us more. Got it. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for those are helpful questions. Looks like Val, you have a question?
Yeah, if you could clarify for me a little bit, the inferior easement, is that where we say, excuse me, have an easement to mow, but not to raise a levee? Or what sort of a situation gives us an inferior easement that needs improvement?
That's a great question, Val. Yeah, you brought up a pretty good example. There are easements that we have found that have very good coverage for operations and maintenance, but they don't provide for construction or even the expansion of an easement. I mean, of a levee system, for instance. So that's one really great example, and we found that there. And then there's some where it's vague. Maybe it gave construction clearance, but it's sort of vague. It's sort of in one case I saw an example of an easement where it was pinned. The Corps was giving a particular district operations and maintenance access to a property, but it didn't mention further construction. And in some cases, the grantee and grantor was reversed, and so it didn't actually give the local district authority to work in that area. It gave the Corps or another third-party authority. So it, perfecting who the grantee and grantor are on those. In some cases, the boundaries, the geospatial boundaries, are not delineated correctly, or due to subdivision, it's vague, or something was extremely vague and didn't actually even have parcel lines or meets and bounds, and like some of those we can sort of toss out. And then there's other things that establish a prior right, such as the reclamation plan that shows that there was maybe an easement intended by the Corps or a Corps plan, but then it never got recorded. So those are the sorts of things that help establish a right, but they're definitely fall short of giving us perfect access or something that the Corps is willing to move forward with to construct.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions before I move on? Okay.
Yeah, sort of a general one, particular to Penn 2. The interstate bridge replacement is going to require us to acquire huge parcels within Penn 2 for where the I-5 bridge will go. It is not anticipated to really begin. And there may be a timing issue If we acquire an easement or acquire property so that we can rebuild part of the levee, what do we do with IRB? Do we then give them that right to build the interstate bridge, or what's the deal with that? Because there's lots of land in Penn 2 that's going to have to be acquired.
I mean, when I understand you're talking about as a temporary construction easement, that they will probably request from us to construct the bridge when that time comes. I'm not exactly.
Or Pier 99, to be quite specific. They're going to have to acquire that property based upon their current plan for where the local access bridge is going to go.
Yeah, well, we're involved with the Interstate Bridge Replacement Project design team. We have updates from them, and then we'll be discussing those sorts of issues and exactly what sequence and who needs to purchase. Obviously, they're most interested in purchasing permanent, either having permanent easements or actual fee title in cases where it's going to be future right of way. And I think anything else will be negotiable. So we haven't gotten into that level of discussion yet, but we will be having to work out those issues with them in the coming months and year.
Got it.
Evan, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, and I just want to add, I think there was an assumption in perhaps the question or something you said, Mark, of that we would be the ones to grant them an easement. It really depends on who owns that property at that point. You know, Mill is going to need to determine what he wants to sell off or what he wants to provide easements for, and what his future desires are for that property. And it's not just the interstate bridge that's been looking at that property. You know, we have a need there. The city of Portland has long been talking about various investments that could go in that location. So that will be one of the areas of continued discussion once we get into the design phase and move forward a little bit further in the project.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, so that ends this part of the talk. I have a few slides that I'm talking about contingent properties that we decided we would roll into the executive session so that we could speak freely without. So I'm going to kind of take any final questions and offer up that we can move to executive session to talk about any particular parcels, and again we can talk about the notion of contingent acquisition that I laid out in my memo. And seeing none.
Mr. Chair, I move that we move into executive session.
Thank you. Do I have I see Kathy's with us now. Do I have a second?
I second that.
Yeah, can you read, while it's recording, can a board member read the basis for the executive session? And once you move into executive session, we can stop the recording.
What page is that on, Juan?
It's the agenda. It was the PDF that was attached to the email. Should be the first page.
So that would be page 1.
Yeah, Val
Yeah.
has it, I think. Usually the chair will do that on the agenda.
It's gonna require some recitation of numbers and subsections and all
You're
that
talking about the board will
legalese.
convene an executive session to discuss information that is exempt from public disclosure under the Federal Freedom of Information Act, ORS 192.355 parentheses 8, 192.660 parentheses 2 parentheses F, and 5 USC section 552 parentheses B and then parentheses 5. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, perfect.
And let it be noted that now at the resuming regular session that 4 board members are present. We do have a quorum to do business.
Thanks, everyone.
Next item on the agenda is fixed billing. So Lori, do you have a presentation on that?
I do, thank you. Can you allow me to share my screen, please, Wendy? All right, can you all see my slide? All right, I will get started. Good afternoon, I'm Lori Baker. I'm your Director of Finance and Administration. And today in your meeting packet, you have a number of documents that provide more information regarding the proposed fixed fee for MCD maintenance and administrative services. I'll be walking through the packet today and answering any questions you may have. We're asking for your consideration to approve the fixed fee today. I do want to note that we're presenting this information at all of the individual district board meetings this week, and will only proceed with the fixed fee if all districts approve. All right, so this is a list of the documents we'll be reviewing today. You'll see that I'm starting from the back of the packet at attachment 6, and will work my way forward through the documents. I'll also note that the packet you received includes all information for all of the districts, so you can see the calculations and the dollars associated with each district. So let's start with attachment 6. This is on page 53 of your packet, and this contains the document that includes all of the questions that we received from our board members from all districts related to the fixed fee proposal and their respective answers. Attachment 5 is on page 50 in your packet and includes template board financial reports so that you can see our proposal for reporting of the fixed fee. In the blue highlighted section, you'll see a line added for the levee and drainage system maintenance fixed fee. And in the yellow highlighted section, you'll see a line added for the administrative fixed fee. Administrative costs are currently included in the contracts and agreements line on the financial report. All right. Ooh, this one's a little fuzzy. I apologize for that. So attachment 4 is on page 49 of your packet, and it includes all of the financial data for each district that was used for the fixed fee calculation. I'll walk through each section of this report in the next slides. All right, so here we have the blue columns in attachment 4. This is all of the expenditures of each district. So for the 2016-17 through 2020-21 fiscal years, these numbers were taken from the district audit or review reports, so you can tie those out if you so are inclined. The 21-22 numbers are unaudited, but I'll note that the staff costs that are used for the fixed fee calculation are final, and they won't change. The 22-23 budget numbers align with the budgets that were adopted by the district boards. The green section of attachment 4 shows the costs that are related to the fixed fee calculation. These costs are reported in 2 lines on the financial report. Regular maintenance costs are included in the levee and drainage system maintenance line, and administrative costs are included in the contracts and agreements line. For the maintenance costs, we've reviewed each year and removed any costs that would not be included in the fixed fee. The gray section of attachment 4 documents all the costs that were not included in the fixed fee calculation. If you like math, blue minus green equals gray. Okay, and I'm going to skip this slide and go to yours. So attachment 3 starts on page 46, and it shows the calculation of the fixed fee for each district, as well as graphs showing the trends of the expenses. In the blue square on my screen, you'll see the maintenance and administrative costs that are for the services included in the fixed fee. These numbers are directly from the green section of the financial detail report that we just reviewed in attachment 4. In the yellow section, we've calculated the % change in cost for each year. We calculated the percent change for maintenance, administration, and for costs in total. For those of you who like to check the math, in the orange box, you can see the percentage change in total costs for 2017, 2018. This is calculated taking the total cost for 2017-18 of 187,829 minus the total cost for 2016-2017 of 211,705 and dividing that difference by the 2016-17 total cost of 211,705. In this case, costs decreased by 11.3% in 2017 and 18. In the green box, you'll see the calculation for the 5-year compound average growth rate and the average growth rate. So there was some discussion last time about the difference between the two, depending on some variations. So we did calculations of both. For all of the districts, we found that the calculation of the fixed fees was lower when we used total costs than when we looked at maintenance costs versus administrative costs. For Penn 2, the compound average growth rate was lower than the average growth rate. So we're using the compound average growth rate to calculate the rate increases for the 23-24 and 24-25 fiscal years. In the purple box, you'll see the total fixed fee, which includes both administration and maintenance for the next 3 years. The 22-23 fee is equal to the budget for these services. The costs for 23-24 and 24-25 were calculated using the increase, the compound average annual growth rate. The costs for 23-24 and 24-25 were allocated between administration and maintenance so that we would still have that information for the financial reports. I'm going to stop here because this is probably the most important calculation of the entire discussion. I just want to see if there's any questions because this is a lot of information. I realize a lot of numbers. And I don't see any hands, so I will keep going. All right, so attachment number 3 is on page 46 of your packet, and it shows, oh, whoops, let me keep going. Attachment 2 is the service listing, and that's on page 44. And that includes a sample listing of services that are included and services that are excluded from the fixed fee. Services included in the fixed fee are also part of the IGA. All right, and attachment number 1 is all of the red line copies of the IGAs, including the most recently approved Appendix B to the IGA. And with that, I can take any questions about the proposal at this point. And I don't see whose hand went up first. Let me stop sharing my screen. If I can get to that point.
Well, Val's the
I saw
president.
Eric had
Let's let
mine.
him go first.
Okay, who was first?
Eric,
All right, so my understanding is that the example of costs and projects not included in the fixed fee, that these costs have been eliminated from the baseline that you use to calculate. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you very much.
And we went through all of those individual dollar amounts in the projects to make sure that we had pulled all of those out so that we didn't have fluctuations in the percentage increase calculation that shouldn't be there.
Got it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Val?
thank you for doing that. In reviewing the materials, I was pleased to see my questions have been answered. I think this program to reduce costs is a good idea. I'm back on the program. If everybody else agrees, I think you've answered my questions, and I like to see I like to see the product. I like the product that I see. That's what I'm trying to say. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I really want to make sure that we're providing you all the information you need from a financial perspective when we're asking you to make these sorts of decisions. So hopefully going forward, we can make sure that we're responsive like that as well and be able to provide you all the information you need. Eric, did you have another question?
Yeah, I do. So on page 53, there's a question, why you're not passing on the full cost to the districts. This came up and it was just sort of a tangential comment from Jim. And if you or Ben have, or on health, have sort of the documentation as to why MCDD does not believe that they're passing that on, I'd love to be able to see it. I have not seen that analysis.
Part of it is the history of it, and Wendy can probably help me with this answer as well, but part of it is just historically, when we knew that there were, just as when we look at these costs and look at some fluctuations where we knew that there was fluctuations or issues that might impact the districts, the MCD folks made the decision to not pass on those expenditure amounts. So it was a conscious decision in many cases, is what I've been able to find when I started to talk to folks about the history of it. It was never something where the individual districts were saying we don't want to pay, and I apologize if that came across that way when Jim was talking about this at the last meeting. It really was an intentional process, I think, to be as fair as possible to the districts related to the services that we were providing.
Yeah, but is this a multi-million-dollar issue?
No, it's not a multi-million-dollar issue.
So, got it.
I think it's similar to the decision that we made in the calculation, right? You could look at the increases by an average growth rate or compound average, and the decision that we made was, well, we'll look at both of them and we'll take the lower one because it's an estimate. So
Got it.
we're trying to be fair. We want to provide these services to the districts, and we want to make sure that we're taking care of everything that we need to.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I was just going to suggest that I might ask Corky about it. I'm sure Emily has some history as well, but it's the only board member I've heard express that sort of historic information.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Mr. Chair, are you ready to have a motion to accept?
I am.
I move to adopt resolution 2022-0901, amending the district service IGA with MCDD.
Thank you, Eric. Do I have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Mary Helen. Is there any further discussion?
I just wanted to add, when I called Karen earlier, she said she wasn't able to call in today, but she did want to make sure that you all knew that she was in support of this proposal.
Thank you for that information, Emily. Let's take a roll call vote to find out where we are. Mary Helen?
I vote yes because I rely on Val and Eric for the math. I can't add 2 and 2 and get 4. So if they're fine with it and Karen, our treasurer, is fine with it, I have no reason not to support it. So thank you.
Mary Helen. Eric?
Aye.
Kathy?
Aye.
Val Humble votes aye. So it passes unanimously, and I suppose will be implemented if the other districts also pass it. Thank you. If that's that, is there any new business?
Just remind the board members that we have the landowner meeting coming up on Thursday, October 27th. The mailing should go out in the next week.
I noticed that the SDAO last week said that Nextdoor is now opening up special districts to have the authority to use Nextdoor to publicize things. I just wanted to make sure that staff was aware of that and could perhaps utilize that. A lot of my neighbors do use Nextdoor, so sending out information that way I think is desirable.
Yeah, it's still limited to your zip code. And so I've been in touch with them to try to expand our reach, because currently we can only communicate with Sunderland, but we'd like to be able to reach your neighborhood. So
yes,
we're working on it.
I appreciate you being aware of it and working on it, Evan.
Yeah.
In the past, getting Columbia Edgewater to vote their shares has always been problematic. So when this goes out, please let me know so that I can go and talk to Brian Tunstall and say, please sign this and get it in. We really do want to have quorum at it.
Eric, I don't know. In the past, I've always had their votes. Brian's always given me their votes. Dick Schaefer, who doesn't live in the East Columbia anymore. Sorry, the
That
name,
looks great, Mary Helen. Thank you.
Brandewine's property.
I wanted to let you know that there'll be both the mail-in proxy card as well as a way to do that online. So
Yeah, and and we
whatever
get,
they decide.
we get TMT development, and Kristen from there gives me, I think she sends in the postcard. I'd have to look at last year, but usually that's how it happened.
Mary Helen, she told me last year that she'd like to come to the meeting in the future. So
Oh, good.
it'd be good for both of us to.
Well,
check.
and they just got a new like community engagement person for their building stuff. So
Thank you.
Well, at this point, we'd normally hear a report from the director, but you'll have to read that in the packet since he's out of town, I guess. With no other business, then this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you very much.
thank you. I
Thank
hope to
you.
see you
Have a good
next
day.
time.
Thank you.